And if you can make the inside as real to you as the outside is, you will truly know the kingdom of heaven and all that is in it. All right, so today we have here Bobby Morton, and I'm very grateful for the fact that you're here with us and you're going to share with us your journey. I believe that it's going to help many people. So if the people that are watching right now arrive to this podcast, there is a reason, and I believe that there is something that you can get from it. And just stay until the end. So, Bobby, welcome. Where are you again? In Denver?
I am south of Denver in Castle Rock, Colorado.
You just moved
Uh,
there, but I see already like you put all the nice stuff around the house.
oh yeah. I moved here in January and moved into this house almost 2 months ago.
I love it. It's beautiful. I love
Well, thank you.
all the little feathers with the wood and the arch.
Hmm.
Awesome. All right. So I would love for you to talk to us about your son Jared, who is now in spirit, and how his earthly journey here, and then
Right.
we will go from there.
Okay, sounds great, Sylvia. Thank you for having me on and your interest in my story. It's a story similar to many others. There are before Jared's crossing over, I was not aware that so many children have passed, and yeah, so I was like most of the rest of the world, not knowing what to say or what to do, and all that. Jared crossed over in October of 2014, so I'm coming up on 7 years where both of our lives completely changed. Um, Jared was born in La Ceiba, Honduras, in April of 1990. So he was just about exactly 24 and a half when he transitioned. He he's an awesome kid. He's an awesome kid on this planet and in spirit as well. Big heart, would do anything for anybody. Always put other people before himself. Um, like to please everybody. Went out of his way to help others. Jared was adopted. Actually, both of my children are adopted because I believe that was the way that Spirit meant my journey to go. There are a lot of children out there that need love, and it doesn't matter how you create a family, family is created. Finding Jared was definitely Spirit led. There were many detours, crossroads, and not not really, I guess, normal ways to go through the adoption process. But anyway, I was led to Jared when he was a couple days old.
Oh,
Like I
small.
said, he was born in La Ceiba, Honduras. It was a private adoption where I met the people I needed to meet in Honduras through a woman that I had met at a adoption conference probably 6 months prior. In Honduras, it's the adoption process is a lot different. First lady of the country runs all of the foreign adoptions. I had to go down there with my ex-wife for 2 weeks, go through the entire process down there, and then wait 3 months while the adoption process went through. Then I had to go back. It was about 3 months later, and bring Jared home, and that was a process in itself. We spent 5 days there, going to the U.S. Embassy, getting visas and all that to come into the U.S. Actually, through Miami, where you live. And he was just about a year old when we finally got him home.
Oh, wow. So from 2 months to 1 year?
He was probably 2 or 3 days old, but there was a long process in getting down there. There had been issues with the foreign adoption stuff going on in the country. So I had found a woman that I guess was kind of like a foster parent. He lived in her home with her and her grandson for the entire time that he was in Honduras, and we were in contact with them and people that I was going through down there. So he came home at just about a year old. It was actually on his older sister's 4th birthday. So it was quite a birthday present for her. He grew up in a small community outside of Boston, where we lived at the time. A very outgoing child, very athletic. We called him Flipper because he wouldn't just sit in a chair, he'd run and flip into the chair. But that's the way he was. Extremely athletic. He had more athleticism in his little finger than I have in my entire body. It was like he was born with a soccer ball between his legs. They would take him off the field and put him in the goal because he'd score 7 or 8 goals. He was quite an athlete. Baseball, soccer, hockey, whatever he took up, he could do because he put 110% into it.
Hmm. Hmm.
When he was in high school, we moved to Cape Cod, where he had a lot of friends because he had summered most summers down there since the time he was a baby. So he had just as many friends down the Cape. But it was a high school that he flourished at. He was not particularly fond of school, but he did extremely well when he got along with the teachers. And if he didn't like the teacher, then it wasn't so good. But he liked to work with his hands, learn with his hands, rather than study in books. So when he graduated from high school, went on to a trade school where he took up carpentry and cabinet building, construction and management.
Oh, nice.
When he graduated, he was building houses. He started a business on his own, so he did a lot of side work.
Oh, he started a business on his own
Yeah, it was
for
called.
building houses?
He mostly did side jobs, putting on decks, building sheds, stuff like that. The main jobs he had were building houses, mostly framing, some finish work, and all that. But he absolutely loved. He was the life of the party. He always had to be with people. Was always talking, always laughing, big smile, and his heart was bigger than his smile. He was my best friend. I used to call him the question commander because he would always check in with me and ask questions and all that. So he had quite an upbringing. The only downside to that was because he was a person of color, he did experience racism and all that, which unfortunately is still alive in this country, in this world, as most people know. But yeah, I would say that he had a normal, happy child upbringing, other than the prejudices, but he kind of took it with a grain of salt and wiped it off. But anyway, when he was 23, he kind of got in with the wrong crowd and was experimenting with drugs, mostly opiates. But he didn't like it at all. He would come home, straighten out, get away from it, go out and buy a new truck and working for himself and doing all the construction jobs. But he had a hard time turning people away. So he would get reeled in again by the wrong crowd. And this went back and forth for most of the last 2 years of his life. He had come home a couple months before he transitioned, told me he wanted to go into a rehab, but he didn't want it to be a replace one drug with another rehab. So he got into a Christian-based rehab center where there were no substitutions for the opiates that he had been on. He was working. He had to have a job. I think he got paid $5 a day or something ridiculous. But he absolutely enjoyed it. He was released from the rehab center, and they had set him up to go into a sober living house. He came out of the rehab on a Friday and couldn't get into the sober living house on Monday morning. We talked quite a bit over the weekend while he was out. He had gone to see an ex-girlfriend who was somebody that he had, I guess, codependent with drugs and everything. But she had a 4-year-old son. He was the best influence in his life, and he loved the son, and the son had been asking for him, so he went there. On Sunday night, I spoke to him for a couple hours after the football game, and I kept trying to get in touch with him on Monday morning, which I was not able to get in touch with him at 3 o'clock that afternoon. I received a call from the hospital that I needed to get down there. My son was there. I needed to get there as soon as possible. It wouldn't give me any other information, so I drove 2 hours to get there. He had already passed. He had already passed before they called me. He had passed at this ex-girlfriend's house. I immediately asked what were the circumstances. They told me it was a heroin overdose, which I knew that it wasn't because of his desire to get clean. That I asked the police I kept calling the police about the investigation. They didn't return my calls. This went on for a week after his death. I finally got in touch with the lead detective that had gone to the house when they received the 911 call. They spent 8 minutes there. They were told it was that he passed from a heroin overdose. Instead of cordoning off the scene and doing an investigation, within 8 minutes, they and Jared were gone from the house by ambulance to the hospital where they pronounced him dead. I finally was told by that lead detective a week after Jared's passing that there was no investigation. There would never be an investigation. That he was a drug addict. He was dead, and I should get over it. I nearly had a heart attack. I, at the time, did not think that I would survive Jared's passing. I wasn't sleeping. My blood pressure spiked. I had all kinds of medical issues. It it wasn't very good. This didn't help much. I immediately went down to the police station and told them I was going to sit in their lobby until the head of detectives came up and spoke with me. They told me he was gone, wouldn't be back till the next day. So I said, well, you know where I'll be. I'll be sitting on the bench over here. And about 20 minutes later, he came out, said they were mistaken. He was still there and had speak to me. They told me there was no investigation. The case was closed. The police report was this long. And when I explained about the situation with the ex-girlfriend, they wanted it, and I didn't receive any of his belongings back. They told me that I should go over and pick them up. I informed them that I didn't feel safe there, that this girl had threatened my life before, that I wanted his belongings, and I was afraid of what I might do if I ever saw her again. Mm. They told me that out of a courtesy to me, they would go over there, but they'd have to send 3 police officers because it wasn't a safe house to go to alone. My question was, well, why were you going to send me? And so about a week later, I received his belongings. His telephone had been destroyed. The card had been taken out. Everything on it had been deleted, pictures, text messages, things like that. I got the report from the phone company of all of the last calls. His phone had been used for 3 days after he died. I gave all the phone records to the police. They didn't follow up. They told me there wasn't anything they could do until I had some evidence. My reply was, I thought that was your job. Right. So 4 months later, I received the autopsy report. Jared did not die from a heroin overdose. It seemed like they were unclear about things. So the medical examiner put on there that he had died from a drug overdose, that he had been a drug addict, and that any drugs that may or may not have been in his system, and it only showed a small amount of one drug that was in his system that could not possibly have led to an overdose. So I went to the medical examiner and asked why she put that as the cause of death. She said, well, I really couldn't find any reason. I didn't find signs of foul play, so I have to go by the police report. It was then I discovered that the medical examiner works for the police. So I went to the Attorney General's office, but anyway, I started this long journey of 18 months of trying to find justice for Jared, which the blue wall, which really does exist, kept going higher and higher all the way up to the Attorney General's office. At that point, I was basically killing myself. I was not sleeping. I had medical issues. My blood pressure was still high. And I was fighting a losing battle. So I knew that I had to forgive myself. For those 18, 19 months, I went through, I called it my personal hell. I was just existing, and I knew I couldn't go on living like that, just existing. So basically, I had to forgive myself. It was an inside job. But I had been doing a lot of work for those 18, 19 months of working on anger, guilt, blame, shame, you name it, all the emotions of grief. And there are a lot of them. I personally believe that we all have to go through the grief journey and work everything out. And like I said, it's a personal job No one else can do it for you. No one else can walk it for you. You have to do it yourself. But I knew that I couldn't go on living that way. So it was about that time that I went to a Compassionate Friends conference. And I was being nudged by Jared. And I knew where Jared was, and I knew that he was fine. He came to me the day after his funeral, and he appeared to me through a hawk. He sent the hawk messenger. And I'm sure that knowing Jared, he knew that he could get my attention that way because the hawk is my spirit animal. I've always been spiritual, not religious. I've always followed, as you can see by decorations in my house, the Native American cultures and beliefs and spirituality, especially the Lakota Sioux. And I had taught that to Jared. Part of his heritage was Mayan Indian. So he kind of liked that and followed that as well. Although he had been brought up in the Catholic faith because of his mom. And so he was very close to Jesus too. He wore a wooden necklace around with a wooden cross on it. WWJD, what would Jesus do? I always told him it meant what would Jared do. But anyway, he came to me that day, and the next day he came, and he was very persistent. He circled me around the house for 5 or 6 minutes. It seemed like an eternity screeching. And he had decided to take up residence in our yard. So he built a nest up in a pine tree in the back of the yard right over our boat and all that. So I knew where Jared was. He was coming to me. I did my first reading, I think it was probably 9 or 10 months after his passing. And the first thing that the medium said was, I see this big hawk. Does that mean anything to you? And so whatever skepticism I had at that point was completely gone. And it was a spot on reading. I don't rely on mediums for readings because I believe that we all have that power to connect with spirit. And Jared comes through very, very strong, as you know. He's extremely persistent. And he doesn't give up. He never gave up on anything. So like I tell a lot of people, he was a pain in the ass in this life. He's a pain in the neck in spirit because he's trying to push me at 100 miles an hour. He loved to go fast. Mm. So anyway, I went to this conference, getting back to the story. And it was there that I found my first glimpse of hope. I went to a couple of workshops. In one of the workshops I went to, there was a woman with a very similar story to mine. Her son, Brandon, had passed 4 years previous, but I don't know if it was the words she said, if it was spirit connecting me or whatever, but I felt in my gut that I was going to be okay. It was the first time I had given myself permission in 19 months to laugh, to smile. And when I walked out of that workshop, I was smiling and I knew that I was going to be okay. That's when I found the light, or I call the light hope. And, hope is a very important word to me. I started a page called Hope Soars that I try to bring hope, positive ways of thinking to people in this negative world. And I now have an outreach with 2 partners that is called Healing Through Hope. And also under that, we have another outreach. Healing Through Hope is specifically for parents that have experienced the trauma of child loss. And we have another outreach that our kids were pushing us toward called Sacred Journey Mission. And that is the first initials of our three children's name, Sean, Jared, and Mallory. Sacred Journey Mission is for all those who have suffered loss. Doesn't matter what the type of loss is, whether it be, loss of a loved one, divorce, loss of a job, just being lost on this journey. What we'd like to see is, or what our outreach tries to do is to help people in this life live life on life's terms, because life doesn't always throw us things that are fair. Although I do believe in the soul plan, that we do come to this planet to experience the things that we really can't experience in spirit. And that's when I believe that we learn our greatest lessons is through traumas, trials, and tribulations. I had been diagnosed after Jared's death with PTSD and complicated grief because of the experience of our circumstances of Jared's passing and all that. So, I had all those emotions, anger. I was blaming myself. I thought it was my responsibility to keep my son alive, and even I couldn't do that. I felt like a failure. So there were a lot of personal things, and these are all personal parts of our own journey that we have to go through and work through. And perhaps that is why we experience things like that. They say that the greatest things that we learn come from the most difficult lessons. This was a life changer. Had you known me the first 60 years of my life, you would say, well, what happened to that guy? He's completely different. So I call it the before and after me. I compare it to the journey of a butterfly. Just as a caterpillar, you go into a cocoon, which I call the liminal space, where all transition takes place, and you come out on the other side, or a caterpillar comes out on the other side. A butterfly going into the cocoon, they had no idea what they were getting into or what was going to happen. And I believe my journey was very similar. On the other side of that, I have found joy again, the joy of life. I actually like myself better now than I did then. I have experienced a lot. I've learned more in the last 7 years than I learned in the first 60. And I believe Jared's soul meshed with mine. I was more introverted. Jared was extroverted. I guess I'm kind of like that now, especially around others that have similar journeys to mine. I can feel their energy and connect with them. It's quite a journey. So where I am now, I believe that Jared's passing led me down a different path, and here I am.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. I want to give you the chance to take a sip of water.
Thank you.
Well, I asked you a question that I believe that was just in my mind, when you were saying the story. I have so many questions, and if I have all these questions, it means that you had all those questions as well, and maybe you still have some questions surrounding like the circumstances and why in this way, why can I have clarity, why can I have justice. I have a question, because there is a moment in which I believe that you decided to surrender to the fact that you didn't have control over the investigation, and the fact that maybe you're never going to receive the answers that you're looking for, and how were you able to make peace with that and accept that and surrender to that?
Okay, great question, Sylvia. Thank you for asking. First of all, I was a control freak for 60 years. I kind of grew up in a somewhat dysfunctional family, as many of us do. And what came out of that for me was control, because I was always the one stepping up to the plate and controlling the situations that were going on. I discovered, I guess, after those 19 months, that control was an illusion. I never had control over anything. Maybe what time I'm going to get up in the morning, maybe what I'm going to have for dinner, but that's about it. It's kind of like worrying too. Worrying is like sitting in a rocking chair. You spend a lot of time, but you don't get anywhere. So I believe that's all forgiveness. And actually with Sacred Journey Mission, we're doing a study on a book by Jack Cornfield, a lamp in the darkness. And he even talks about forgiveness, which to me was a big thing. And it's not forgiving the situation. It's not forgiving someone else. It's an inside job. All of our work comes from the inside. So I had to forgive myself for giving up that impossible quest of trying to find justice, trying to find answers. I had to forgive myself for letting that go. And I'm sure that Jared had a lot to do with that.
Hmm.
And it was a big lesson for me, because I was never willing to do something like that before. That I would always try to find the answers and try to find the root to the problems to fix them. But these are all things that you need to do yourself. You can't fix anybody else. I'm a firm believer in holding space, and that's basically what we do with our outreach programs. Is we hold space for other people, and holding space is listening with intent. You listen to somebody else's story, and thank you for listening to mine. That you have no judgment, that you realize you cannot fix it, and that you are giving them, and it's a very sacred, it's one of the most sacred things that we can do, is to hold space for others. It's to take their story in and understand them. And if they ask you a question, you can answer it. And it's a lot like what a psychologist or a coach should do, is to listen to the story and then maybe say back to the person what you heard them say. And then that helps them to work it out on their own, because and when you lose a child, you really need to tell your story as many times as you need to tell it, until you don't need to tell it anymore. The poor people in the first 2 years had to hear that entire story that I gave you. Now my story is Jared passed because of the disease of addiction. How, I don't know. And it's as simple as that. That is the way he passed. And so that's my story now. I was able to simplify it, but for a couple of years, I had to walk through that whole story until I didn't need to tell it before. So I guess to me, it would be forgiveness, that you have to forgive yourself to be able to let that go and accept the fact that you may not have all the answers, and maybe you weren't supposed to know all the answers, that you were supposed to go through that process to help yourself to learn that lesson in this life.
Mm. I was thinking that I'm learning to be very aware of the language that I use when speaking, especially when speaking to parents who have children on the other side, because for example, using the term "let that go" can be very tricky, right? Because people feel like if I let that go, they feel like they're letting go of their child. Um, so so what would you say about that? And then I have a question about forgiveness. So remind me of that question. So what would you say to somebody that says, how can I let that go? No, I need justice. I need to do this. This is in honor of my child, or things like this.
Well, people used to tell me all the time to let that go. I would get very irritated. It wasn't up to them, it was up to me. When I didn't think I'd ever be able to let it go until I found the answers and I found justice. I wanted everybody to pay for what happened. So I'm very much aware of everything. I didn't let go what happened. I didn't. I very well remember exactly the circumstances of what happened. And I was fortunate through a reading. I asked a question to a medium, a friend of mine, if, well, first of all, I told her she didn't have to do it if she didn't want, but to have Jared tell me everything he remembers from the night of his passing. And basically, what I was told was pretty close to exactly what I thought probably happened. And that gave me comfort to understand that it wasn't crazy thinking, that I was trying to blame someone else for Jared's passing, because Jared had part in that passing. It was part of his life for the previous couple of years before he passed. He did choose to walk into a situation that he probably shouldn't have gone into. So I didn't really forgive the people because I wanted nothing to do with them. I wasn't going to make friends with them or anything like that. I just came to the understanding that I had done everything that I could do. And my forgiveness was forgiving myself for for giving myself permission to let that go, because I wasn't going to change anything. Jared wasn't going to come back to this planet. And I know he's extremely happy where he is. All of his disabilities, his addiction issues, all of that are gone. He's in the perfect place, and he is working from that side with other younger people on this side that are going through similar situations. So, um, and my losses were the expectations that I hoped for him. Never see him get married, never, uh, you know, see grandchildren or see his successes or failures. But that was my loss. That wasn't Jared's loss. His it and it was his journey, and it's not an easy thing to do. It's things that you have to work with yourself in order to get to that place. And for some people, maybe it's easy. For others, it may be very difficult. I know for me, it was difficult until it wasn't. It was like I had an aha moment. A light bulb went off, and I was able to get to that point. And
I love that what you said. Your loss was the expectations and the things that you thought that are normal for a human being to go through in their earthly journey, and then you couldn't witness because he's not physically here. um that's I never heard that. I never heard that the way that you put it, like my loss was my expectation. But I realize that that's the truth, where everybody feels, especially with children being in spirit, like if they were here, they would be doing this and that. They would graduate school, they would get married, they would do all these things that to us humans are very important. But on a spiritual level, we don't know. I mean, I believe we learn to understand what is truly important besides life experiences, which is something that we can have over and over and over again. Um, so I wanted to ask you something because I didn't ask you this. You mentioned the hawk, but I would like to ask you some of the signs. I don't know why this was in my mind while you were talking, and I believe that I need to mention it. But I remember like a few months ago, we were talking one day, and then on the phone, and then you called me back about 30 minutes later after you took a shower, telling me that you heard his voice while you were taking a shower. So, so was that the first time that you could actually hear his voice outside of you?
no, no. Um, so J- Jared is very good at bringing signs. He uses the hawk a lot. He actually goes and visits a lot of people that I know with with the hawk. So that was the first way that he brought me brought me signs. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a workshop at a bereaved parents conference in I guess 3 weeks. It's the first full weekend of August, and one of the workshops I'm doing is I don't remember the exact title, but it's living or continuing your relationship with your child through grief and in spirit. And it's basically about signs and our connection with our children and how we keep that connection going and how our relationship, although very different than in the physical, continues when they're in spirit. And so most of the time I've given this it's a panel workshop uh, 3 times, and I'm actually doing it with 2 other people, Beth and Raina. It's at Bereaved Parents USA in St. Louis. But anyway, so Jared came to me with that sign, and he's learning in spirit too. So when Jared was young, we always had an alarm system in the house. I had put one down Cape Cod because my ex-wife and the 2 kids were there all summer, and I was at home working. So I put the alarm system in so that they would feel safe, especially at night. So Jared used to say when he got older, and I believe it was because he liked to sneak out of the house, why do we have an alarm system in our house? There's no bad guys around here. And I said, well, some people have them to keep bad guys out. Others have alarm systems to keep their son in. So probably maybe 2 months after he passed, the alarm went off 2:30 in the morning. I jumped up, said, Jared's bedroom window. And then this happened night after night after night at around 2:30 in the morning. So that must have been when he liked to sneak out. I don't know. But finally, it got to the point where I disconnected the alarm from his window because it was annoying. And it happened like 20 or 25 times over the course of 5 weeks. So another thing that he does is he controls music. He and I both have a strong affection with music. So he started controlling like playlists. He and I traveled a lot in my truck, and we had acceptable songs that we both liked. So we put them like on a playlist, Jared's playlist. But I have well over 1,000 songs on my iPod, and all of a sudden, and I wouldn't be on this Jared's thing, and there were other songs that weren't on there, but it'd play like 6 or 7 songs in a row that would mean something to me, and he travels with me in spirit a lot. In answer to your question about the first time I heard Jared, was Jared passed 9 days after my 60th birthday. He didn't get to talk to me. I was in Las Vegas. He called the next morning, left me a message, which I still listen to. It's the last message that I have from him, telling me, sorry I missed your birthday, how much he loved me, thanking me for everything I ever did to help him in this lifetime. And but it was all about love from a big heart. So the night before I was going to turn 61, I was in bed. I usually go to bed around 11:30, and then I read till I fall asleep. So I'm in bed reading. All of a sudden I hear, "Happy birthday, Dad," in Jared's voice. And I looked up and looked around, and I looked at the clock. It had just turned midnight. He wanted to be the first one to wish me a happy birthday because he didn't get to wish me one on my birthday when I was 60. So every year since, I'm like, okay, Jared, wish me a happy birthday. Well, that hasn't happened, but I've seen him 3 times in spirit. He talks to me all the time. I feel his energy comes through the back of my head, down through my shoulders, into my heart chakra, and sometimes all the way down to be grounded. So I know when he's around, he has no problem nudging me. I heard him one day. I was at the beach, and ever since he passed, I've found heart rocks. I have a thing with 23 heart rocks, but I find them everywhere. They're rocks or stones shaped like a heart. So one day I was at the beach, and I felt this strong energy, and water, as you know, brings energy, being around water a lot, and said to me as clear as day, "Dad, go for a walk on the beach until you find a piece of green beach glass." I was, what? So I thought, all right. So I started walking down the beach, and I'm looking for green beach glass. And as I'm going along, I'm finding these hot rocks. So I'm picking them up and throwing them in my bathing suit pocket. And I must have walked for a half a mile, and I had to go to the bathroom really bad. But I thought, well, he sent me on a mission. So there it is, a piece of green beach glass sitting there as plain as could be. So I picked it up, and there was a shell and 2 really interesting pieces of small driftwood around it. So I picked those up, put them in my pocket, ran back to the beach there, and went to the bathroom and at the beach. And then I went back and I sat down in my chair and I put it back, and I looked up, and there was a sundog around the sun. You familiar with what a sundog is?
Is it the aura
Kind of
type
like
of?
it's like a round rainbow around the sun, and it's filled in with kind of like clouds. So I didn't think they'd come out. I snapped pictures. So when I, looked at them when I got home, and I put them on, on my computer, it looked exactly like the sign for the Archangel Michael. And and then I cleaned off all the stones and all that. So there were 23 hot rocks that I found on that journey, and the green beach glass, the shell, and the 2 pieces of driftwood. Jared's birthday was 4/23. 4 other pieces and 23 hot rocks. And take from that whatever you want. But I look at it as a sign, and I don't believe in coincidence. Call them synchronicities. It's not everybody gets, everybody does get signs, but they're not aware of them. You can look for them as much as you want. Probably you won't see them if you're not open in heart and spirit.
It's interesting.
But hopefully it was a long-winded answer. Yes, I've heard Jared speak to me on a few occasions. Yes.
Yeah, no, the question was about science, and you mentioned, and I feel like it's important, to mention how, because I believe that I would personally find unique ways to communicate with my mom. I would start little, like maybe with a feather or a penny, and then grow bigger. Like the other day, this lady was telling me that she wanted to receive a sign from her mom, and because it was her mom's birthday. And I'm like, I am 100% sure that your mom already sent you signs, but you need to be clear on what you believe a sign is, because your sign might be right in front of you cannot see it. And so she said, how can I know what sign I want? And I'm like, well, think about your mom, and what would identify her. And she said, well, she had about 200 pictures of Ganesha in her house. And then she told me another thing. And she said, and I'm like, okay, so the sign might be around that. And she said, oh my goodness, my husband found this morning on the floor a Ganesha calendar, and it was intact. It was perfect. And I didn't even realize that that could have been a sign. So I believe that they really are trying to get our attention, but we are so close. Like, I don't know. I feel like we are not able to see what's already there. I actually would like to ask you, because you've been on this journey for about 7 years, as you said, and there are people that are just getting started, that are experiencing what you were experiencing in those 18 months. And as much as they might enjoy hearing everything that you shared, and might actually say, like, I wish that this happened to me, what would you tell them to encourage them just to keep on going, and to keep to have hope being the focus of their journey?
Okay. I believe that everybody has to go through the grief journey, that they have to come to terms with it, and everybody's grief journey is different. You can't really say that expect this, expect that, because I've heard all different types of stories. So there is no time limit to grief. I always remember the grief and the circumstances of it, and I don't want to lose that, because it helps me when I'm listening to somebody else's story to remember and to understand. So I guess that I'm empathetic, but I'm not an empath, in that meaning that I understand somebody else's pain or their journey. I can listen to the journey. I won't tell them what's right or what's wrong. Everybody's belief system can be different. But the good thing is I don't absorb their pain. I can listen to it. It doesn't bring back my pain. It doesn't bring me back to my pain. I don't take on their pain, but I do take on their story, and it's heartfelt. And I understand, and I can listen with understanding and no judgment, and not trying to fix it, because I can't fix anybody else's. I can only tell them my experience, my story. I believe that I'm living proof that that grief and joy can coexist in the human heart. That we can still find the joy of life. I think, to me, it was very important for me to have the relationship, and still is, have the relationship with Jared. I believe that his spirit has driven me to this journey, the path that I walk now, and trying to help others. And I have a lot, I mean, Jared's biggest signs that he brings me are people. He brings me people. I've met so many people on airplanes. I'll be sitting next to somebody that 2 months ago their child passed. And it's like, how does that happen? I can't explain that, but it's just like Jared has connected with their child in spirit, and between the two of them, they connect me with somebody else. Whether or not they need to hear my story, I don't know. I don't try to explain it or figure out answers. It's just, I feel like Jared brings me people. I can't tell anyone that their grief will go away. I can say, and time does not fix everything. It softens things. It definitely gets softer over time. You can ask for signs. You may not get them, but pay attention to what's going on. You know, like with the hawk, I knew right away for me that it was a sign from Jared, and I thanked him, and he knew that he was getting my attention, so he kept using that sign. I think if you find 100 pennies and you're not getting it, that's a sign from your child, then they're going to go on to something else. They want to get your attention, to know that they're still with you. And to me, Jared doesn't bring me pennies or dimes or whatever. He does bring me hawk feathers. I find a lot of them, but I see a lot of other feathers. I don't necessarily think it's a sign from Jared. He doesn't bring me butterflies. I know that it's somebody else bringing me the butterflies, but it's not Jared. My dad passed when I was 32. And that was three and a half years before Jared was born. The two of them are very, very much alike. I had the same relationship with my dad that I had with Jared. So another sign is the song by Cat Stevens, Father and Son, because I see that song from both sides. I see it as son with his dad, which is the way the song was written. But now I see it as being the dad with the relationship with the son. You know, and the two of them, I've had a couple of readings where the two of them are just sitting around having a conversation with me, joking. And actually, when I went to your circle last week, I think it was, I had a reading, and Jared and my dad were there. and it was a conversation. It was a conversation. I get a lot of laughs out of them now. So,
Mm, I love
yeah,
that.
so I don't know. I can say my belief is that, and I know it's not just a belief. I know that Jared's with me in spirit. My dad's with me in spirit. They're two of my guides, although they were very much different. They were very similar.
Mm,
So that is hope, and I believe that hope, a key component to healing, is hope. You have to have hope. Hope is, to me, an action word. It's not just. It's not a noun. It's
mm,
adverb or a verb or whatever the action words are. But yeah, it's an action word, and hope brings healing. And in order to have hope, you have to also have forgiveness. Because if you carry anger in your heart, resentment, and all that, there's really no room for hope.
mm,
So you have to work through those to get to the point where you
mm. Yeah.
So, and you did say you were going to ask me something on forgiveness, and to remind you, I don't know.
Yeah. I remembered. And honestly, like I'm just putting myself in the mind of somebody that might be watching this and say, okay, forgiveness. All right, it seems like something so easy, but how can I do that when the, all of me doesn't want to, or I don't know, like I really do not know how to forgive myself, or I cannot, I feel like I can't do it. So do you have resources or tools or books or things that you could suggest somebody that is feeling this way to look through so that they can do that work within, or meditation, or some words
Well,
on that?
well, I believe meditation is a key component to getting close to spirit, to get out of your mind of those thoughts that bring you to that place of despair. And it all starts out with breath work. Breath work is amazing. I was doing breath work with Jared. He had separation anxiety when he was little. So we'd just lay down on the floor and do breath work, because you have to take everything else out of your mind to just concentrate on your breath. And without breath, we don't live in this lifetime. So I think meditation helps a lot. I had, and I believe that a lot of things in my life previous have brought me to the point where I could get to where I am now, because I did have the Native American spirituality that, and their belief system and spirit and guides, and all that, and spirit animals. I meditated probably for 10 to 12 years. I had a meditation practice when I was young and living a different lifestyle, until life got in the way and I put on blinders and did what I was supposed to do. Jared's passing re woke me to that point. And forgiveness of yourself, it's hard work. It's forgiving yourself is the most difficult thing you can do. So it's work. And like I had said previously, I believe you have to do the work of grief in order to get to that point. You have to go through each emotion, because we're taught in the Western society, um, you know, let it go, hold the resentment, hold it inside, whatever. And you have to work through it, because I knew personally I could not go on like that.
Mm,
So it was a lot of work. It's probably the most difficult work that we ever do, but you'll never regret doing it.
right. Yeah, I believe there are rewards when we do that type of work, and it's not necessarily material rewards, but um, from maybe mistake point of view, I believe that uh, raising our vibration has to do with dealing with all that stuff. And that's why, even if you want to become a medium to do this for others, there is a lot of self-development involved. And I know some mediums have gone back to therapy to deal with their own stuff, right? Because we get nervous, we are also angry, we all have our pains and things that we need to work through in order to be able to connect with the higher frequency that spirit vibrates at. So forgiveness and gratitude, I believe those are the highest vibrations available to us, that allow us to connect with the spirit world, which is already here and already trying to get our attention. So I love breath work, as you were saying. Actually, breath work to me has been the portal to that allow me to have the most mind-blowing spiritual experiences with spirit. And I believe that once we have our direct experiences, there is no way to go back and ignore what we experience. So I pray that whomever is watching this video, this podcast today, feels inspired. And as you were saying, hope, uses hope as like to bring action inside of their life and start working actively on themselves, because as you were saying, there is you don't regret it afterwards. You cannot regret it. I believe that if there is something that we regret, I don't think that we regret it, but if there is something that we should regret, is uh, having stayed too long in a state that was not serving us the way that uh, we can be served by our emotions and our feelings.
Mhm.
Any last words that you would like to share with us?
Well, I guess if you're interested in what I said, and you're looking for, other people that are traveling the same journey, we do have the outreach. Our website is www.healingthroughhope.net. We have two monthly meetings. They're usually on Sunday night. Information for that can be found on the website. If you have any questions, email address is healingthroughhope123@gmail.com. You would also ask for a resource. The book that we're talking about with Sacred Journey Mission now is by Jack Cornfield, A Lamp in the Darkness. That book actually comes with a CD with meditations that go all through the book. And there's 10 chapters. We've been going through different chapters, but there's stuff on there about forgiveness and other things. And it has meditations. Jack Cornfield's also written a few other books that are also very inspirational. There's a lot of resources and materials out there.
Mm. I will put everything that you just said in the description, all the links and everything, so that people can just click on them and reach out to you. um, I'm grateful for you and for the fact that you're providing this space for people. I believe that it's very important to show up for one another in the way that we can. And we're all unique mediums. That's what I believe. We are all unique. We all have unique ways to show up to for spirit and for one another. So it's wonderful that you have a place that you can use for people to get together. And because I believe that healing also happens in groups, right? That's what
Mhm.
everybody's telling me as well. We cannot think that we're going to be doing this alone. So there is a lot of alone work, but at the same time, feeling that there are people that can understand and that can be there while you go through your own journey is important. So thank you so much, Bobby. Is so wonderful to to be doing this. It truly is. To me, it's like, wow, I don't know. I just feel like this is what they do in the spirit world as well. They participate to podcasts, they go to the movie theater, they go to groups, they go to classes because they also have to do in my personal opinion, in my view, uh, their work in their own way. So there is somebody in spirit that does the things that we do as well. And it's so wonderful to do it from this side of the veil.
It is, and you know as well as I do that Jared brought us together. So
Yeah. Literally the other day, I saw the big statue of a hawk. And I'm like, okay, Jared, it's time to interview your dad. I got it. So here we are. I'm glad that we make this happen. Thank you so, so
thank,
much.
thank you, Sylvie.
And thanks to all those that have watched. Have a blessed day, a glorious day, like you say. I love it. I'll see you soon.